All right, thank you, Alex. So our next speaker today is Matt Aslett. Matt is a research director for the Data Platforms and Analytics channel at 451 Research. Matt has overall responsibility for the data platforms and analytics research coverage, and his own primary area of focus include data management, reporting and analytics, and exploring how the various data platforms and analytics technology sectors are converging in the form of next-generation data platforms. Please join me in welcoming Matt.
Thank you to the organisers for having us here at this event. So yeah, really glad to be here. My name's Matt Aslett, Research Director for Data Platforms and Analytics at 451 Research. So we're an IT industry analyst firm, kind of similar to some other much larger rivals. You can see we've got a few hundred employees, a couple of thousand clients. But what I think and what we hear from our clients, kind of differentiates us is sort of a focus on innovation and emerging technologies. And I've been with the company about 10 years. What was interesting, actually, we were discussing over dinner last night. Obviously, in some ways, we think about, the move towards more in-memory computing as being something that's very now and to some extent new. But actually, over those 10 years that I've been with 451 Research, I've seen sort of firsthand from engaging with our clients, both on the vendor side and on the end user side, the evolution of the way in which in-memory technologies are being used, from in-memory cache through and grid through in-memory compute towards being, true in-memory data processing platforms. So I'm going to talk today about hybrid operational and analytic processing, or HOAP, and I'll explain more as we go through, but this is kind of the key sort of statistic as why we think this is highly relevant and interesting. So more than 30% of new database revenue, we think, will be associated with HOAP processing by 2021, driven in part by things like improved customer engagement. As I said, we'll talk about this as we go through. One thing I want to just clarify, so the previous speaker mentioned about our tendency as an industry to use different terminology for the same thing, which is annoying, I know. So why are we not just talking about HTAP, which is probably the most widely used phrase in this space to talk about hybrid transactional analytic processing? That's actually a Gartner term, and it can be a bit awkward. Bizarrely, actually, Gartner, if you have a look, not that I'm suggesting you should, wrote a blog praising us for not using their term and for using our own, which is a bit weird, but that's the state of the industry that we're in. Beside that, sort of competitiveness, we think all transactional workloads are operational, but not all operational workloads are transactional. So we do actually believe that operational is the right term to use. And perhaps even more importantly than that, obviously HOAP is much better than HTAP in terms of sort of report titles and snappy presentation titles as well. So it gives much more flexibility there. And we could talk about the HOAP of the industry evolving, etc. So to put this in some context before I get into sort of the details around this, what do we see happening in the industry? And Abe talked yesterday about digital transformation, and we certainly see a lot of organizations are in the process of becoming more, or trying to become more data-driven, investing even more so than they already have in terms of data processing and analytics, with a view to driving digital transformation. And digital transformation is admittedly a buzzword. It's perfectly okay to roll your eyes whenever anybody says digital transformation, but it is something that we do see that organizations are actually trying to do something about. So we did a survey last year. We saw about 40% of enterprises that we surveyed, 47% of enterprises that we surveyed are actually doing something formal. They have formal enterprise-wide strategies in place to try and become more data-driven, to drive transformation of their business through digital technologies. And actually 93% of organizations are either doing it already or doing it in siloed projects, or at least thinking about it. So only about 7% of organizations we spoke to will admit that they're not doing anything at all right now around digital transformation. And also, it's not just, yes, we are digitally transforming, but there are things we can point to that organizations are specifically doing. So on the right-hand side here, we've got the leaders. This would be the 47% of organizations that actually have some kind of formal strategy in place. On the left-hand side, we've got the laggards. That's the 7% of organizations that will admit they're not doing anything right now in terms of digital transformation. And you can see, it goes beyond these 4 points, but there are areas where we can see a stark difference in the investment in different technologies, things like AI, machine learning, things like cloud-based infrastructure, things like intelligent personalization and prioritization of shifting applications to the cloud. So, yes, it's a buzzword, but yes, it's real. Yes, it's something that is happening, and it actually, is reflected in adoption of specific technologies and strategies around the use of technologies. And it's driven by a number of different corporate initiatives, depending on which organization you speak to. Some will have a greater priority than others. But the number one that we see, and we see this in repeated surveys and interviews that we do with end users, is this idea of improving customer experience. And then, these top three would generally come out, again and again. So beyond that, in terms of operational efficiencies, and also in terms of employee collaboration. So it's very much around, driving, as I say, greater efficiencies, but also greater collaboration, both internally between employees, but also from the organization out to its customers. And this idea of, improved customer experience is really key. Obviously, if we look at some of those previous technologies, machine learning and artificial intelligence, and also personalization as well. And what we're seeing from this perspective is really sort of the investment shifting from a traditional kind of systems of record based applications, which are internal, based on transactional data, very much focused on process efficiency, towards more of an engagement model, towards more customer-facing applications, which are driven by and help drive disruption and are interactive and deliver personalized experiences to those end users. Just to give an example of that, so think about this from a retail's kind of the most obvious example, but it makes sense. If you go into a retail store today, let's say, last year or the year before, traditionally you go into a retail store, you're looking for a particular item. Your engagement with that brand or that business has been with a person. It's a person you go to speak to advise on where to find whatever particular item you're looking for. Perhaps, some advice on whether that shirt is really your color or not, and just recommendations around how to engage with the business. And actually, not that hardly anyone does this anymore, but if you're paying with cash, that is still, the engagement is it's not actually entered into the system of record or computerized until that transaction is recorded. And only then is that data then made available, perhaps, through a batch process, into the systems of analysis, traditionally, obviously, the data warehouse, maybe a data lake, and then that data made available for data analysts, decision makers, and obviously IT professionals to create reports and dashboards to do some analytics based on that. Increasingly, what we see is that analytics is being brought closer to the data to improve the speed of data processing around that data coming through this system. But more importantly, that system of engagement has changed. Obviously, that is most noticeable, if we think about it from an e-commerce perspective, and you're online, you're engaging with perhaps chatbots, or you get just, as soon as you're in there, you get recommendations without even being aware that that's happening. But also, this is happening from a retail environment, on-premises retail environment. Increasingly, you walk in to a retail store and you will see shoppers walking around engaging actually with the brand, but through either their own devices or through devices that are provided in store. And I've had this experience, particularly obviously in the US, but I think we're seeing this over here as well, and obviously we see this in Asia, where actually you walk in and your engagement the first point of engagement is actually with some kind of device, but you're engaging with that organization through things like chatbots and personalized assistance. And what drives that is what we refer to as sort of the systems of intelligence. So the recommendation engines, machine learning, statistical analytics, behind the scenes would actually drive the intelligence in those systems of engagement. So what are the data processing implications of this? So there's several. Obviously, real time is the first. That engagement, the applications need to be responding in real time to that end user as they enter the store, or at least as they start to engage with that application. It also needs to be responsive. So this isn't just about delivering up static content. It's about actually delivering personalized content, personalized recommendations based on their previous shopping experience and items that they previously purchased. And also it needs to be agile. So it's not just about, as I say, it's not just static content, but it's also content that is contextually aware. Whether that person is using their own mobile device or using the device that's provided in store. And it's so that's content that it's actually delivered based on how the end user wants to engage with that organization. And this is something, some of this content and slides here I was saying last night, I've sort of borrowed from some of my colleagues in our customer experience area. And we can go to much more detail in the research we're seeing around how the need for contextually driven content is driving the way in which organizations have to think about how they engage with their customers. So what are the requirements that then enable organizations to deliver on those three areas? So one obviously is memory, and I have nothing to say about memory compared to our last speaker that's not just going to make me look stupid, so I just will say you definitely need memory to do this. And there is an argument to be made that actually you can't deliver these kind of applications and these kind of workloads if you're not doing it in memory. Stream processing is obviously highly relevant, not necessarily for every use case, but definitely we see the shift towards the continuous processing of events is actually what enables organizations to actually deliver the applications that can provide this kind of context and content that organizations are looking for, that their users are looking for. And thirdly, it needs to be hybrid. And there's multiple, hybrid, another great buzzword at the moment, but there's multiple things that we think about when we talk about hybrid. So it could be obviously on premises and cloud, and absolutely that is part of this in terms of delivering data from anywhere. It could be in terms of sort of relational and non-relational data, obviously, but also in terms of both operational and analytic processing at the same time. So we're getting towards the point here, which is what Hope is all about. And so if you think about traditional data processing, you have your OLTP systems, your system of record. You have your OLAP system, the systems of analytics, obviously mapped back into the example we talked about earlier from a retail perspective. And you ETL the data in between the two. So what is Hope all about? It's really about, in some ways, removing that need to ETL, move the data between those two environments, and serving up that operational data for analysis. In particular, driving those systems of intelligence and systems of engagement that we talked about to deliver those applications directly to the end users. So we think about this from a database market context. There's two things that are important in this slide here. One is that to see that, well, Hope has dropped down a line. You didn't need to see that, but I've obviously noticed that immediately because that's really annoying. But apart from that, Hope we see as part of the operational analytic process. The operational process. We're not talking here about the replacement of the data warehouse. The data warehouse is not going away. It continues to serve a purpose. What we're talking about is analytic processing of operational data. And how that translates today, this is 2016 revenue, so this was the last full year of revenue we did when we produced this analysis, which was done for a specific client, but then we've opened that up to others. As you can see, it's only actually about 1.6% of the combined database market, which is overall about $50 billion. So a very small percentage of the market. So in some ways, is that really relevant? Is it really important? Why are we here on stage talking about this? Because it's important to consider how the market has evolved and is evolving. So this includes all the maintenance revenue for existing applications which were never designed to take advantage of the hybrid operational analytic processing capabilities that are now available. So think about all your existing traditional systems of record applications. Those are driving this revenue. So if we strip that out and we just look at the new revenue for new projects and new applications, immediately we see that hybrid operational analytic processing, based on our estimates from existing revenue, accounts for over 10% of total database market revenue. So this is fairly significant. But more importantly, if we look ahead about how we anticipate the use of these capabilities will evolve, in particular driven by the development of new applications to take advantage of them, then we're looking at well over 30% of the market. So we're looking at, then you see traditional OLAP, analytic processing, data warehousing, data marts, etc., 30%. Hope actually being slightly larger than that in terms of driving applications, just over 30%, and more traditional OLTP style applications, just under 40%. So it is going to be a significant portion of the market if or when organizations develop the applications to take advantage of that capability. So this is the fourth plinth over in Trafalgar Square. Where are we? That way probably. Which, for those of you not from the UK, might not be aware, lots of plinths in Trafalgar Square with statues on. This is one that we started building about 100 and something years ago, and for some reason, I don't know, never got finished. And so every couple of years, we have a little bit of an argument about what should go on it. And I think at the moment, there's various artworks actually displayed on this. But basically, we never reach a conclusion, and so it just sits there, and we have a good old argument about it every couple of years. But this is kind of a good representation of hybrid operational analytic processing as it stands today. The foundations are there for organizations to build their applications to take advantage of this capability. But in order for this to fulfill its potential, those applications need to be built. Hope the data processing capabilities that enable hybrid operational analytic workloads are just the beginning. It's just the foundations. So what kind of use cases and applications are we talking about? And actually, I think from some of the sessions I was in yesterday, we saw some great examples of this. But just to think about this, particularly in the context of what we have done to date. So as I say, you've got your OLTP applications, your systems of record, you've got your OLAP applications, basically your enterprise analytic applications, data warehousing, etc. We're talking about emerging enterprise operational applications. So delivering things like, and it's not, this is by no means a complete list, but things like recommendations, personalized content, personalized offers, things like real-time fraud analysis as well. Making decisions based on analyzing operational data in real time. And just to bring all that together and just to conclude on this in terms of, some of the key takeaways. Obviously, there's much more to discuss here in terms of some of the trends, and perhaps we can get into some of that in the panel to follow. But we do see that catering in particular to the way in which users want to engage with organizations is driving the development of applications to take advantage of this hybrid operational analytic processing capability. It's an increasingly important part of a business, and the way in which they not only engage with their customers, but also their employees, the way they drive operational efficiency, and obviously all important, the way they drive competitive differentiation. Hybrid operational analytic processing database workloads, we think based on the data we have and from what we hear from our end user clients that we engage with, is set to grow significantly. In particular, driven by the delivery of automated systems of engagement and the underlying systems of intelligence that will support those. But the development of those new enterprise operational applications is reliant, for example, things like recommendations, personalized content. It's reliant on the development of applications to actually take advantage of that use of in-memory hybrid operational analytic processing. So we're sort of on the brink of a new wave in terms of delivery of applications that take advantage of these capabilities. But as I said, it's really dependent on organizations first of all, adopting those technologies and then developing the applications that take advantage of them. I think that's my cue to stop talking. Yeah. So, yeah, should we move on to the panel? Thank you.